what we've found over the years, and I think that this holds true now just as it has held true 5 years ago, just as it held true 10 years ago, and that is, well, one, golden cardinal rule, security policies follow the user lifecycle. So again, it's user-focused. You know, I was at a conference once, and one of the speakers before me used this term, so I'm going to steal it from him because I thought it was kind of a nice way to sum up the problem. He said, in my company, when someone comes in, we give them a backpack, conceptually, right? And in this backpack, we put in their user ID and whatever we're going to provision for them next, you know, maybe their email account or an account to a HR database or whatever. And then this person progresses through the organization a few years later, maybe changes jobs, changes roles. So they take that backpack with them, they toss more stuff in it. 10 years later, they're hauling around this huge backpack and nothing's really changed except they got a lot of stuff in their backpack. Well, that's not really what I mean by security policies follow the user lifecycle, right? When a user's role changes, when their job duties change, the privileges associated with that user should change as well. More drastically, if that person were to leave the organization for whatever reason, then that backpack ought to be emptied immediately. Bottom line is it's user-centered, and the policies need to be associated with the user. So what's the first thing that needs to happen to get the infrastructure in place to really address governance? You know, what we tell people and what people have found and told us is the first thing is to get their identity systems under control. To say, let's consolidate our identity namespace. So folks here, I don't know, some of you said you have Unix systems in place, yeah? Anyone? Yes. Okay, those of you who do you have, are you using Etsy password, NIS? You have it all tied into some central identity repository? Yes? Good for you. First step, consolidate your identities. I mean, this is one thing we found time after time, whether it be on different platforms like Unix, Linux, Windows, what have you, or for different line of business applications, you know, web applications, et cetera, is we find these various silos of identity. So the first thing to do, get everyone consolidated. Consolidate your namespace. Once you can do that, you know what the heck's going on. Once you can do that, you can set up policies. Once you can do that, you can have people log on as themselves, right? Anyone use shared accounts? Now or in the past? Ever? Yes? So we have some more advanced folks here from a security perspective. That's great. You know, just kind of solve some of these problems. These are common problems we found. Shared accounts. People are not logging on as themselves. Okay, now what do I do when I see root did this? Root did that. Who the heck is root? How many people have access to root? Log in as yourselves. Elevate your privileges if you're going to do something. So that's the next thing, right? If you can consolidate your identity, now you have a single way to set policies like, what's my password policy? What's the password strength? How long should it be? How often should that password change? That's all a good thing. Once you can do that, then you can talk about, what am I going to do with respect to assigning privileges to these users, right? So that I can have Mark. So I can have Mark log in as Mark, and then if he's going to administer my SQL server, he can elevate to a role that gives him those privileges, and I can still say, this is Mark. He elevated his role. He has more privileges now, and maybe when I do that, I can start doing more auditing because it's that privileged access that I care about. Now, auditing, that's something that has to happen across the board, right? This isn't a phase. This is something that we need to do continuously. Continuous monitoring, right, is the term. And I also added automation here because in order to scale, in order to get to any kind of scale, you have to be able to automate. And so it's not the kind of thing that I think makes sense to toss on at the end of any kind of investment, right, in your infrastructure. It's the kind of thing to think about from the beginning, right? I have a bunch of identities. I want to consolidate them. Can I automate that? There are certain things that I might repeat over and over, like onboarding a user, like changing a user's role, automate that. Generating a report, automate that, right? So consolidate identities. Address privilege management, but make sure you have a good auditing system in place and an automation system in place as you go along. Now, what's helpful, I think, for us, is that a lot of these best practices and security principles have been codified. There are regulations already written, coming from, whether it be FISMA or PCI or what have you, right, that help us understand, maybe help us comply, right, with these best practices and security principles. To do things like assure that I have separation of duties, assure that I have a policy of least access privilege in my environment. People log on as themselves, they elevate privilege if they need to. They're only allowed to do what they should be allowed to do for the role that they're in. One example I've given is in a Windows environment. Even in a totally vanilla Windows environment, I'll talk to some folks and say, well, do you enforce least privilege? And they say, yeah. And I say, okay. Do you have people who are just IIS admins? And they say, yeah. And I say, do you have people who are just Exchange admins? And they say, yeah. How about SQL? Yeah. Okay. SharePoint? Yeah. Okay. So what's your point, Matt? And I said, well, okay, do they just have privileges to address IIS or SQL? No, they're all given domain admin privileges. Okay. So that's not really least access, is it? Yeah. So, we see this all the time. We want to start addressing these.